On today's episode, Felix and I are joined by journalist Aída Chávez, who was at last week's WelcomeFest in Washington, D.C., to tell us about her time there and all the wonderfully abundant things that she saw and experienced. Aída, welcome to the show.
Hi, guys. So good to be here.
And then at the end of the show, we will be sharing some music with you, some recently commissioned music that I think that you will quite enjoy. But before we get into that today, I think it would behoove us to talk a little bit about a couple of the events that happened over the weekend. I'm thinking specifically of the just violence that's happening in Los Angeles right now as people begin to basically fight back against paramilitary federal law enforcement, which has been targeting, elementary schools, immigration courts, and is certainly promising more violence to come. Similar clashes happened in New York. And I guess I'm thinking about this happening at the exact same time this weekend where the Madeleine flotilla, the ship that was sailing to Gaza with Greta Thunberg, Liam Cunningham, and other activists, was interdicted in international waters by the Israeli military. Their cargo was seized, and they're currently being held in Israel. I'm sure they're about to be let out of the country, but these things all seem somewhat connected in my mind in terms of both who's being targeted by ICE, but also just the fact that they're targeting schools and courts and just picking people off the street. It all seems it's all coming home to me, is what it seems like. And whenever something like this happens and riots occur or there is violent clashes between people and federal law enforcement in this case, I think there's always this round of debate about whether this is helping or hurting the cause of immigrant rights in America or immigrant communities. And rather than debate that, I just whenever I see stuff like this, it's just it's not a matter of whether it's justified or not, or whether you think it hurts or helps strategically. All those are other debates. This is just inevitable. When you treat people this way, eventually they're going to fight back. And that's what we're seeing right now. And you can wish away that, oh, I wish it didn't have to be this way. But the way ICE is behaving, they're asking for it. They're courting this, and this is just an inevitable reaction when people see the law being turned against them in such an unjust way.
Yeah, I mean, that whole conversation about whether it's people saying that they should be waving American flags or that they should be thinking about the Buttigieg 2028 campaign. It's particularly nauseating right now because I saw someone say look, we shouldn't expect unaffiliated protesters to have the Democratic Party's best interests in heart, but it's so unfair that the Democratic Party gets affiliated with these protests no matter what happens. Which there's this larger narrative of the Democratic Party as Gil from The Simpsons. There are these lovable losers who just all these bad things keep happening to them. Not that this is a consequence of them co-opting every protest movement besides the ones that had anything to do with Israel in the last 20 years that had any popularity for their own electoral gain. They just did that 5 years ago. Obviously, I think it's ridiculous to say that Chuck Schumer is in cahoots with fucking George Soros to create chaos in cities for what? I don't know. But if an internal poll comes out that 65% of Americans support these protests, they will be all over it. They will have in-house activists on the scene there. They'll produce a slate of candidates that arise from the movement as movement leaders that we've never fucking heard of before. But secondary to that, I mean, this sort of reminds me of October 7th when people, just before anything, the moment it happened, everyone's favorite thing to do is to act as their own Frank Luntz. They only know people who are exactly like them, have exactly the same experiences. But all they ever do is just game out how the hypothetical, median American will react to everything. With October 7th, it was all these people going, this is the end of any pro-Palestinian activism because Americans will everyone will just be so disgusted by this. It's probably the end of the left. And obviously that is not what happened. I mean, there are similar themes in how Democratic primary voters will often vote based on what they assume other Americans will consider too liberal or moderate enough. But it's especially now is such a fucking pointless exercise. This thing of just constantly gaming out what is the exact right thing, what is too scary, what is the right amount of resistance for the average American, as if the last 10 years have not shown that public opinion is completely amorphous, and all these opinions that pull a certain way, they don't seem so deeply held that they can't turn on a dime in 8 fucking months. And like, just the idea that the protesters in the first place, that their motivation is attracting public support, as if that is the be all and end all, that someone in Northern Virginia sympathizes with them, and not what I think was kind of the point of these protests, which was to put the actions of ICE front and center, to make everyone,
and also to impose a cost
Yes.
on these lawless gangs of like these lawless press gangs of like masked, without any identification or warrant or whatever, these masked thugs that are like, we all saw the videos this weekend of them just like tearing people off the streets, arresting, seizing people at an elementary school graduation. Like, I would think the purpose of these protests is to enact a cost on, these lawless gangs for their behavior. But Aída, I want to get you in here because, like, to Felix's point about like, well, how is this all going to poll? You recently covered the DC WelcomeFest, like centrist extravaganza, the centrist Fire Fest, and I'm just wondering, like, how is that section of politics? Like, how do they metabolizing these ideas about like, is the American public pro or anti-immigrant, and like, are ICE detentions popular or unpopular?
Well, they're just totally unequipped to deal with the present moment. Their obsession with polling and data and the numbers and like the positions that they claim like regular people want, it breeds us like especially out of touch when you have protests like these or things like the genocide in Gaza, and then at these events, like they'll go through the entire thing without even slight mention or reference to it.
Because like, I think they will point to polls that show that like, oh, Trump's deportations are popular, but then like when it's revealed that like they're deporting people without criminal records, and in fact they're seizing people at immigration courts who are going to apply for citizenship or check in on their visa process, and they're being the ones seized, it becomes very unpopular. Like, it's very popular when people imagine that these ICE is seizing like Pablo Escobar or drug cartel sicarios, but like not their neighbor or friend or spouse.
Yeah. I mean, we had this conversation about immigration during the last election, that like, okay, sure, I guess, this sort of immigration restrictionism polls in a certain way. And it was never like, 70-30. It was like 55-45. But you go back, 4 years, and it was completely the opposite. Then, of course, like, obviously, when you adjust for torturing random people with green cards, stripping citizenship from people with green cards, sending people to these fucking unaccountable foreign hellhole prisons, what we said at the time was, when people actually see this in practice, you may get a different result. But at the time, I don't think we even imagined how like truly horrifying it would be in practice.
In terms of like imagining how horrific this all is, I mean, I think a lot of you probably saw that clip from over the weekend of police in Los Angeles just shooting an Australian TV reporter with a less than lethal round, and like not accidentally. Like, Felix, you pointed out, like you can see the cop in the video line her up, take sight, and pull the trigger.
The LAPD moving in on horseback, firing rubber bullets at protesters, moving them on through the heart of LA. Whoa! You just shut the fuck up!
You okay?
I'm good.
So if they're doing that in broad daylight, like being recorded on a live news broadcast, what do you imagine is taking place in the areas that you don't see and never will see being carried out by these same people? And then, like, once you imagine that, what do you think the like appropriate, strategically sound response to something like that is? Or do you think maybe that like the people targeted by this aren't thinking about essentially like this issue in those terms? Like perhaps they're just afraid and angry and what have a right to defend themselves against this kind of lawlessness.
By the way, does this conversation about optics extend to them? Does that extend to ICE agents and the police officers and the Marines that will probably end up killing at least a few people? Or is optics only a consideration for the people that are being fucking terrorized?
Aída, like in reading your piece about WelcomeFest, like it seems like the bête noire of the abundantist coalition are what they refer to as the groups. Like, what are they referring to when they talk about groups? And I'm sure immigration rights groups are talking there, are thrown in with that lot. You say like walking around the Welcome Fest, you heard a lot of people talking about how bad open borders are. So like when these abundance people, they talk about the groups, who are they referring to, and what's their alternative?
Yeah, so I think they're referring to like the immigration groups, the climate groups, young people, like left-leaning advocacy groups, but their whole like groups thing that they did all day, I think it's a euphemism for just anyone who expects more from their lawmakers, anyone who makes any kind of demand. And so, like Matt Iglesias, for example, he was blaming like immigration groups, advocates for immigrants, and the climate groups for how bad like Joe Biden was in office, saying that they were what was standing in the way of effective policy.
When they see like these images of chaos or violence in Los Angeles and clashes between people and the police, like, or when they're confronted with the idea that like ICE is basically without identification, without even showing their faces, are just kidnapping people from like schools, tearing away mothers from their children, throwing them in unmarked vans to be sent to some legal black hole for like, and I think we should be clear here. All of this is for the crime that is a civil misdemeanor. Like if you have driven in a car over the legal speed limit or over the legal limit of alcohol, you have committed a more serious crime than overstaying a visa. So, like, what is their answer to this? Do they just think that, well, hey, they have a point, and we do need to crack down on illegal immigration, or do they see horrors like this and they just like is the answer? We just you need to elect better Democrats.
Both. I think a lot of the people I spoke with and a lot of the speakers on stage are really that far right, where they see these images and they think, oh, that's good, actually. Like Democrats should support this or, try to outflank Trump on the right on immigration issues. But I did encounter a lot of people who were, not to like project too much on them, but they did seem quite ashamed of the immigration issues, of the Gaza issue, and kind of this awareness of what the Democratic Party has been doing.
Were those people that were like more ashamed, not who didn't just like cheer at the idea of like protesters being ejected? Did they like trend on the younger side, like the college kids who fell in with a bad crowd?
Yes, it was basically all college kids and early 20s where I would ask about Gaza and then like just pretty quickly they would go silent. They would think about it. They would avoid eye contact. They would stutter. And so I could feel a real sense of shame. And like, their voices would get low and, sometimes they would say like, oh, well, it's an issue that, Democrats just shouldn't run on. They should stick to the domestic. But there were some who would, get a little closer and kind of like whisper this forbidden idea at the centrist rally that like, it might help Democrats to have a little bit of empathy for migrants, for Palestinians.
You quote someone in your piece for The Nation when you asked them about Gaza. You quote them as saying, showing some empathy to Palestinians is probably good for the Democratic Party. I think they'll probably need further polling before they, really get out too far over their skis on that one. But what does that say about the mentality here about how they perceive political issues. Because like, look, I mean, you should always be careful about treating politics as morality, but like there is a moral valence to all of these issues. And it's just like, whether it's in 2016, it was a crisis that Trump was putting kids in cages. And now, like, 8 years later, they're like, oh, well, actually, we need to build more cages. And like, we need to ask the question, like, do all kids deserve to be in cages? No. But like, what is the correct number of kids that should be separated from their families in ICE detention centers? Like, do you get the sense that like these people believe sincerely that immigration is bad for America and that undocumented workers need to be purged from America by force? Or is it that they just like they regard it as a problem for the Democratic Party and it's getting in the way of their zoning reform that they really care about?
Yeah, that second one. I think at least with the younger people, and it was quite revealing, just in the way they spoke about the issue. Like the guy you just mentioned, who was quoted in the piece about saying how showing a little bit of empathy to Palestinians might be good for the Democratic Party. Like when he spoke about like the horrors of Gaza, he never spoke like directly about the people and the violence being inflicted. It was more just like the images. Like we've all seen the videos, like everyone's seen the images. And so like that just shows like, yeah, like the detachment on how they just think about these things in terms of like messaging, pulling issues for Democrats and like kind of annoyances standing in the way of their abundance agenda.
Well, getting into that abundance agenda, and like, I mean, I think it is. I mean, we had scheduled your appearance for Monday because we definitely wanted to talk about WelcomeFest, but like, I think it actually pairs perfectly with the events of this weekend, which were, like I said, crises involving outright warfare, slaughter, horror, and you want to talk about crossing the Rubicon. Now, the specter that the Marines, active duty military, will be deployed to quell civil unrest in an American city. For Rubicon heads out there, that is that's a crossing. If okay, but like I think it's like the contrast could not be more hilarious between like these vicious and horrifying things that are happening in front of our eyes now in the borders of America, and like the abundance agenda, like this is their answer to that. Like this is their big rollout for like what they see the problems of America as and like how they intend to solve them. So given your experience at the Welcome Festival, could you just describe like what was like you said there were a lot of like college students there. Like, first of all, how many people were there, and what was sort of the median attendee for this event? Like, how would you describe the people there?
Um, there were a few hundred people. I was sitting in the back row, so my view wasn't that great because the last few rows were empty. So I don't know, it looked a little extra sad from where I was sitting. There was a good number of women, but it was very male dominated. It was like mostly typical like DC freak, but also like young kids that didn't really know how to socialize. And then candidates who were kind of using it as an opportunity to like get money and support because it was hosted by like Third Way, Blue Dog Democrats, the other dark money groups and centrist groups.
Aída, like I wonder what your opinion is on this, because like, am I correct in thinking that like this whole abundance rebranding and the whole abundance movement to me is evidence that the Democratic Party no longer has any fear whatsoever of like Bernie and the squad and like the sort of nascent populist message that is kindled quite a bit of like actual in real world support, but like politically speaking seems to have been totally neutralized. Like after 2016, all the Democrats who ran for president in the next cycle all pretended that they supported Bernie's agenda. But like this go around, after losing and like completely defenestrating like the left part of the Democratic Party, or the left or populist or progressive, whatever you want to describe it, it seems like there's no effort to co-opt the message or the policies. It seems to me that they're just trying to rebrand in a way to sell essentially a moderate centrist politics that is like socially liberal but fiscally conservative, that has a lot of well-heeled donors but no real purchase in the American electorate.
Yeah, that's my read of it. In terms of the actual substance, it was just very like lately rebranded like neoliberalism. And what I thought was interesting too was like the kind of tension between trying to make WelcomeFest like a victory lap, like saying like we own the party, like the threat of Bernie and AOC has been neutralized. And the tension between that and kind of saying, oh, but we're also underdogs and like victims of the groups. What we are pushing, this like abundance agenda, this is actually the threat to the status quo, which, makes no sense because they are the status quo.
Yeah, the abundance guys, I think that I could take Mein Kampf and replace Jews with the groups, and I would be accepted in abundant circles. It is such a weird view of the world that these like nervous, annoying Elizabeth Warren staffers who, by the way, the only reason any of this like groups stuff had any purchase at all in the fucking party was because the Hillary campaign and some of the Obama internet surrogates in the years before the 2016 election decided that identity politics were an amazing cudgel to hit Bernie with in 2016. And for some reason decided that they should stick around, that should be like a lodestar during the Trump years. This, again, what do we always talk about? People who voluntarily did these things to themselves, voluntarily took these positions, said these things in public, acting as though someone broke into their house and pointed a fucking gun at their head and said, you need to start saying unhoused. No, you did this. You were into all of this. You hired the Elizabeth Warren staffers. During the Biden presidency, you were saying, this is actually fucking great. This is the best presidency in history because of all of these Elizabeth Warren people doing all this shit. But this is a view of the world that puts those people, like the people that got the Elizabeth Warren green hex code tattoo, as like the elders of Zion. They're the most powerful fucking people in the world. They can defeat Reid Hoffman and all these, and David Geffen and all these fucking super donors. But at the same time, they're also weak and they'll never win elections and they're foolish and they're defeated. But they're also a looming threat that we have to defend against at all times.
Aída, the sort of the branding for this year's WelcomeFest was the phrase responsibility to win. So what did you see there? What is the plan for winning the next, like the midterms and the next presidential election? Like, well, what's their agenda here? What's the winning agenda that these people are laying out?
Their plan to win is to win.
Okay,
that's good.
Yeah, all right. Score more points than the other team. Classic strategy.
You don't. If you're trying to win, you don't want to be losing. So I can only.
No, that's what they said. Like, I wish I was like trying to be funny right now, but they would have these PowerPoint slides. I would say things like flip red to blue. Me.
Yeah, you don't want to do it the other way or else they win.
And so, like, for example, like one of the first speakers on stage, it was a PowerPoint slide. First was an arrow, but pointing up. And so it was like flip red to blue. And then was it down? I don't know. The arrows don't matter. Another arrow was to keep the blue, and then the arrow forward. The arrow pointing to the right. It had words underneath like Alyssa Slotkin and data.
It's referring to the Star Trek character, not numbers.
I have the curiosity of humans, but there are questions that I will never have the answers to. What it is like to laugh or cry, or to experience any human emotions. Well, if you ask me, these human emotions are not what they're cracked up.
Okay, so get surgery to become Alyssa Slotkin. Get data, just any data at all. If you see an Excel spreadsheet, just start reading it. Print it out and eat the pages.
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
One of the things that perked my interest in your reporting on this is like of the few like concrete policy prescriptions being on offer was something called the Madison Amendment, which was apparently to prevent packing the Supreme Court. Could you explain that a little further? And were there any other sort of gimmicky ideas being tossed around at the Welcome Fest?
Oh, so that was just like a group of young interns going up to people and being like, we got to keep 9 justices on the Supreme Court, like no matter what. And
aim high.
Why? Why? What if those 9 justices were blocking housing reform and urban development?
That is essentially like saying, okay, we shouldn't change the American flag to the Spotify logo. So we need a whole new NGO and a law to guarantee that will never happen. You could also achieve that by doing nothing. Like, there's no threat of more than 9 Supreme Court justices right now.
According to them, there is. According to them, either the left or the far right could pack the court. And so they are doing what they can to stop it. And they have their, like, best and brightest on this, handing out literature.
So, like, how do they plan on stopping it? Is it another NGO funded by, like, the guys who founded Netflix?
I think they're pushing an amendment.
It's so fucking stupid. Like, it's not gonna. Basically, like, if you started an NGO, you gain employment. You are collecting W-2s, and the reason you get up every day and go to work is like, I want to prevent the state of Indiana from colonizing the moon. We need a constitutional amendment to prevent Indiana from achieving space flight. If you killed yourself right now, you would achieve the same result.
Okay, you guys were making me feel a little crazy about this, so I looked it up just to double check. Yeah, it's the Keep 9 Amendment that says I can't even say it. The Supreme Court of the United States shall be composed of 9 justices.
Like, if someone had it together enough to, like, pack the court, like they had the votes, couldn't they just, like, overturn that amendment too? Like, if they're already there, whatever. Just make it a king's decree. It's just as real.
Aída, another thing that I found interesting was some of the characters at this event. Now, we were just talking about how, like, a big pitch of this event is that the quote unquote groups are sabotaging the Democratic Party by, in Matt Iglesias' word, creating bad incentives for the party. By, like, bad incentives meaning pressure on them to pressure on them from their constituents. You know, and, like, I'm wondering, like, okay, they're mad at the left for sabotaging the Democratic Party, right? But then there was a guy at this convention. I'm going to read from your piece now. It says, someone like Liam Kerr, the co-founder of WelcomePack, a group that brought the WelcomeFest to life. On Wednesday, Kerr wore a West Virginia University football jersey customized with the former Senator Joe Manchin's name on the back, a tribute to the conservative Democrat most known for sabotaging his own party's agenda. So could you tell us a little bit more about the guy in the Manchin football jersey? And once again, is there any indication of a dissonance here between being mad at the groups and the left for sabotaging the Democratic Party, and then having the guy who founded WelcomePack happily wearing a jersey emblazoned with the name of the Democratic senator most known for sabotaging Joe Biden's agenda?
Yeah, I should have also mentioned in the piece that he had like a Jared Golden koozie too that he was drinking on stage. Yeah, he was interesting, and so. He was the person who kind of introed the whole event. And so, just to show, like, how weird they are about the groups, one of the first things that he does when he's on stage is put up a picture of the official WelcomeFest protester shirt. I guess they made, like, shirts kind of anticipating protesters. There was one interruption during the conversation with Richie Torres, but yeah, they were just doing that thing of, like, yeah, like, they hate us because we're so right. And so he showed the picture of the shirt, and it's just like a pineapple, and it says, like, official protester at WelcomeFest 2025. I'm not gonna lie, when I saw the pineapple, I thought of, like, swingers. I thought, like, isn't the pineapple associated with swingers?
I thought the same thing.
Okay.
I mean, I thought that's what it was about. Because, I mean, that is like, you know, I don't like talking about Aída a lot because her whole thing just, like, sincerely depresses me. I think, like, that a series of horrible things happened to her in her life, and now she is essentially, like, a living conduit to create sex parties for guys that invent, like, AI-assisted diet apps. Like, it's very like, I legitimately don't want to make fun of her because I think her whole life is, like, incredibly tragic. But there is, you know, Truanon talked about how there's, like, a network of Aídas, and part of it is being very into, like, group sex and swinging. So I just thought they were openly, like, branding it.
Were there any hanky codes observed at the hotel basement where this conference was hosted?
It wasn't even like a particularly nice hotel basement or conference room. And I thought this was backed by billionaires. Like, this is an event that was supposedly funded by, like, the Walton family, Michael Bloomberg, all those guys. You would think it'd be nicer, but it wasn't.
I guarantee you they had 20 hours of meetings about how nice the hotel should be. Like, they thought it was a major coup if the hotel was kind of shitty. Oh my God, most people stay in shitty hotels. Once they see this.
Aída, were you there for the disruption of Richie Torres and Josh Esbarro?
Yeah, that was cool.
I like Josh Esbarro just being like, "Oh, come on, Jesus Christ!" It's just like, do you want to advocate for war? Because if you do, like, you're going to have to deal with some protesters. Like, it's just like how indignant they all get about people being mad at them. It's like it seems to be a big theme of the Abundance Festival.
Yeah, and if their point of view is that, like, these issues that put, like, a majority of Americans support, they should be no-brainers. Well, you should be on those protesters' side then, because they do represent the majority position, the super majority of Democratic voters, and a near super majority of Americans. If we're okay with people being sent to fucking El Salvador because you think it polls well, then this should be a no fucking brainer for you.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, I think this gets into the essential contradiction here is that, like, this whole thing is sold as, like, the Democrats need to win again, and they need to win again by, like, connecting with regular people and making stuff happen and building things and doing things that are popular. But, like, it can't go unnoticed that this whole agenda and this whole strategy that they're employing here, their whole theory of power, which I'll talk about in a second, is just about how to deal with the fact that, like, everything that they support isn't popular and is not going to be anytime in the future.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest themes of the day. Like, almost every single person who got on stage spent, like, a good amount of time talking about how they get yelled at online every day and how a lot of people, like, hate their guts. For example, like, you know, Adam Jentelson, the former chief of staff to John Fetterman.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. He was there, and he one of his, like, biggest pieces of advice to his fellow centrists was to, like, stand up for centrists that are getting bullied online. Like, say something. If you would say,
does that include his former boss? Because Jentelson was quoted in the piece as saying, like, if you're getting a lot of flack, it means, you know, like, you're doing something right. Well, does that include his former boss that now he's gone on record as saying is out of his mind? And by the way, Jentelson is being attacked now by centrists for betraying John Fetterman.
How does Michael Bloomberg feel about paying? Like, he's paying, like, millions of dollars. Like, that's, you know, couch change for him. But he's paying millions of dollars for this conference where, like, you know, people are going on Wellbutrin trips and passing out. And the point of every speech is, like, juice my posts. I would be mad.
I noticed recently that there was this, like, poll done that all the Abundance people were very mad at because, like, they asked, like, a sampling of voters, like, which message is you consider as a better way forward for the Democratic Party. And the first one was this, like, you know, the hodgepodge of, like, abundance buzzwords about bottlenecks and, like, you know, development and shit like that. And the other one was that, like, the wealthy have too much power, and wealthy and corporations have too much power over our democracy, and we should take it back from them. And the second message polled way more higher, like had a way higher appeal than the mishmash of abundance jive. So like, and then like combine that with the just sort of visual contrast between this sparsely attended hotel basement and any of the huge rallies that AOC and Bernie have turned people out for. Like this must rankle them in some way, right? Or is it that like there's another part of the abundance agenda where they're convinced that like that something can be too popular, which is why it's bad. They're sort of like looking for like a just right approach to policy where it's like equal parts hated and loved.
Yeah, I mean, nothing about this makes any sense. That's why going was so weird. Because they all contradicted each other. It didn't seem like many of the people there even really believed in what they were saying. Like, if I would ask someone like, okay, well, give me an example of a political hero, they would say like Richie Torres, but they would seem very unsure of themselves and just immediately say like, I don't agree with everything.
Richie Torres is no one's fucking hero. Like, what an odd response. So you think like Barack Obama would be like the easy stock answer for this crowd, but Richie Torres, like nobody even knew who this guy was until like 2 years ago.
Right. And like, I remember how when someone, when I'd be interviewing someone, how they would light up about like Bernie Sanders, for example. And this just wasn't there for any of the people that they supposedly admire. They couldn't even fake enthusiasm when they talked about these people.
I mean, like it sort of reminds me of like the anti-woke people. If something is like annoying or perceived as annoying enough, you can get a lot of the mileage out of just making your whole thing opposing that thing. But when you actually try to make like a coherent political ideology and a like social identity around just not being something, you will fall flat every time. And in this case, it's especially fraudulent because, okay, maybe you could get more mileage out of we're not that thing in like 2019 when this stuff had more of a purchase inside the Democratic Party. But now it's just like, I mean, it is basically like you're creating an entire identity and asking for money and asking for commitments around a project that is just, we're mad at people from 7 years ago. And we're also not those people. You can't, there's no positive association or like any type of like admiration or any positive anything when it's just, I like Elisa Slotkin because she's not because she's normal. Okay, what does normal mean? Is it just that it polls well? Well, you don't take that approach with like fucking Palestine or this recent polls matter until they don't. I mean, I think the Democratic Party is never going to change, but whatever this is, this whole thing of like, we're going to enforce some idea of normalcy by people who had braces until they were 37. I just don't see a future past, holding endless conferences like this.
Well, I mean, this goes back to my original point, is that like the contradictions become easier to understand when I think like you have to understand like this whole rebrand is just like it's just like they're not looking to win elections. They're not looking to like change policy. They're looking to do the same thing that they were always going to do at the behest of the well-heeled donor class that funds all this bullshit. But they know they need to manage the discontent created by like a base of the Democratic Party that is very much, like I said, like of where these ideas hold very little purchase and are in fact very unpopular. And I think this is just about managing the kind of discontent and like so putting a new coat of paint on like the same old bullshit and trying to convince people that like working Americans' number one problems is like, zoning regulations and not like a lack of healthcare, or that like the rent is too high. And the way that we can lower rent is to like, let private developers build residential units and charge market rates for it so that in 20 years time, it'll come down by 1 or 2%.
Yeah. And all that, like, we're going to have suborbital deliveries and fucking cold fusion powered supersonic travel. all the shit that, like, all the most crackheaded parts about abundance or the Jake Auchincloss stuff. I know he was at this conference. I wish I got to see him speak. He's my favorite guy. It's just like, that is just window dressing to disguise the fact that, taken at face value, what this actually means in practice. What is this entire thing? It is all these people who are identical to the members of the groups that they hate saying, we think this is the most optimal way to attract the stupids to the party. I mean, like, that is the kind of the least cynical reading you could give, that they think this is the best, stupids magnet, this entire program of politics. But all that stuff about, we need to build things and, also deal with kitchen table issues. That is just to make it seem like it's anything but being defined by what it is not.
Yeah, and what it is not is what they're really against, which is populism of any kind, and like the conflation of right wing and left wing populism. And like, it's very clear when they talk about populism, what they're talking about is democracy. They don't like a system of government where people have too much input over the laws or like conduct of the government. Like, that should be left to the smart people like them and the people who fund them. And like, they know what that sounds like. So everything else is just papering over that essential truth, is that like these people know what ideas are popular. They know what a winning message would be for like not just the Democratic Party, but if they wanted to like win over, I don't know, like the most popular politician in this country among independents is Bernie Sanders. And, say what you will about the guy. And like, if anything, like, as I said before, like the fact that the abundance agenda exists is testament to how well he's been defenestrated by the Democratic Party. But like, they know what a popular message is. And it's a message that they're wholly and completely hostile to.
Will,
and they're hostile to it because they essentially have conservative viewpoints about all of these things.
Will, that entire thing about like being hostile to democracy, it reminds me of the conversation we had when Bloomberg was in the Democratic primary. How, like, I still think that the most horrifying outcome for the 2020 election, I think it would have been Bloomberg winning. We talked about it at the time, but like, that would be, out of anyone that exists in like contemporary politics, I think Bloomberg has like the most potential to be like an American Franco. I think his entire political program is like hostile to the idea of democracy, and it would just formalize this idea that the richest among billionaires are the only ones who deserve to rule over nations, and we would just have 20-year terms.
That's what Curtis Yarvin believes.
Yeah,
we just talked about this. That's exactly what he believes.
It's this exact same thing. Just like how we talked about how Yarvin does his own version of, we're like Gryffindor and they're like Slytherin. These are the same people with the same ultimate goal. Ultra wealthy philosopher kings, the end of all democracy.
Normal. And we need to have normal politicians. I thought about that in light of the fact that clearly one of the big stars among elected representatives attending the WelcomeFest is Marie Gluesenkamp Perez. I did see footage of the attendees singing her happy birthday on stage. Aída, did you get a chance to see any of the Gluesenkamp?
Yeah, I saw a lot of guys getting selfies with her.
Oh, God.
Were they hover-handing?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, people were really excited to see her. I would say, like, the people that, like, the attendees were most excited about, definitely, besides Matt Iglesias, her.
Well, I bring up Marie Gluesenkamp Perez because I think this is, once again, another glaring contradiction in terms of making this person your new superstar for the abundance agenda, which is all about normal politics for normal people. Marie Gluesenkamp Perez is one of the strangest people who, like, I've ever seen be in Congress. She is very odd. And like, I became aware of her because it was like right after the 2024 election, right after Donald Trump won. She was like, being heavily promoted everywhere. And like the thing that they were promoting was this video of her talking about like this great reform that she passed in Washington State about like how daycares couldn't serve fresh fruit because peeling fruit counted as like food preparation and they had to be zoned for that. It was, a typical onerous government regulation that's preventing preschool kids from eating a banana. And everyone goes, oh, yeah, obviously, that's sensible politics for normal people. But like, A, the thing she was talking about wasn't even real. And B, I don't know if you remember that video. When she spoke, there is something definitely touched about her.
Oh my God. Like, I think her mom was just drinking an ounce of mercury every day during her pregnancy.
I bring this
she's
up
touched with madness.
I bring this up because like a while back, Ezra Klein, the king, the abundance goat, he did an interview with Marie Gluesenkamp Perez in the New York Times that I wanted to highlight briefly because they have a very strange exchange in it about garbage collection that I think is very telling. So she's talking about like he asked her a question about consumption, and she replies, "That's one of the things we've replaced the idea of freedom as the freedom to consume." And I would argue that we're not just consumers, we're stewards. We are producers. So it's not just what you can buy, but it's what you can make and how you can make things last. And your values, your inner values manifest in the world around you. I have a bill that would require manufacturers of household appliances to put a sticker on the average life expectancy of that washing machine, along with the annual maintenance costs. Because I think the persistence of Speed Queen or something like that does show that people will pay more. But having a class of buyers who has that information available changes consumption habits. Okay, it gets rid of, but like, what I'd like to highlight from that here is that, okay, sure, we should build things that last longer. We should build appliances that last longer. Like, our grandparents had, our grandparents had computers that last, they've never needed a new battery.
I'm playing with my great grandfather's PS5.
But like her solution to this is not just to regulate the industries that produce these appliances to build them better. It's to put a sticker on the shit that they're already producing, telling you how bad it is.
Yeah. The interesting thing about this, like in addition to Gluesenkamp being so weird and just like her most ambitious policy proposal being, you should be aware of how ripped off you are. I don't know how anyone like looks at the last like 5 years of American politics and American culture and goes, oh yeah, normal. The thing that everyone is becoming. That's everything should be normal. Like everyone now has the same personality as that QAnon guy that like killed the mafia boss.
Yeah. So Ezra goes on and asks her, do you think of these as economic policy arguments or arguments that are almost more moral and spiritual in nature?
Oh,
and she says, they're both. My dad used to say, you can talk about your values all day long, but you see somebody's tax returns and you know what they really think. The depowering of the environmental movement has been supplanting real environmentalism with a consumption habit. So she goes on a bit for a while about developing skills and allocating your time to live in relationship to the world around you. But then she says, one of the things I really love about where I live is rural scamania, is that we don't have trash service. So I have to look at all the trash. And it's why I'm not going to buy single-serving yogurt cup, because I'm going to have to smell that for 2 or 3 months before we go to the dump and load up the truck and take everything. You have to see it. And I think it enforces the reality that there is nowhere else. You can't export emissions. The climate is global, and your relationship to the world around you, not just as a terrarium, but as a dependence and something that informs your life daily. I think that really matters to informing what trade-offs people will make. And then Ezra says, I take the point, but most people want trash pickup. I want trash pickup. She says, sure. Ezra says, you represent the city, and that's not going to work without trash pickup. And she says, yes, there are economies of scale, but often they can exclude the fuller reality. Yes, there is modern convenience, but is the climate better? Are we happier? Are we healthier? Do we have what we actually want, or has it been supplanted? And yes, I would like to have trash service, but I would like to have trash service enough to move to a city? No.
Okay, I think I figured out what's wrong with her. She's from the year like 1100 and got unfrozen.
What,
like this is the closest thing. Like people were calling it Maoism. This is like fucking.
She wants to empty the cities.
Yeah, this is Khmer Rouge. Yeah. She said, later in the review, I don't like cities. And like in her ideal world where she is queen, there's no trash collection. You have to look at all your trash. Everyone lives at least 2 miles away from each other. but there's like no regulation on industry.
Yeah.
It's so weird. It's so fucking weird.
I do have one small detail to add from WelcomeFest. Since it was her birthday, they asked her what her favorite candy is. And she said body parts gummies.
What?
What the fuck?
Body parts gummies?
Yeah, like on Halloween, you know, the gummies where it's like different body parts, like an eyeball. Yeah. So that's her favorite candy.
When the abundance agenda is in charge, we'll have Halloween every day.
I very much take your point that you don't want trash service enough to move to a city, and that's totally fair. But what do you think about, and how do you talk to your constituents who do? You know, like, that small minority of her constituents who like trash collection so that like their front yard isn't just moldering with. And by the way, my mom lives in a pretty rural area where there is no trash collection. So she has to like take trash to the dump in the car. It doesn't take her months to do that. Marie Gluesenkamp Perez says, I don't want the trash just sitting around for months at a time. Like you can just like take your garbage to the like, you know,
we figured out she's one of those women that has like, there are cups of water on her nightstand that have been there for 12 years. Like, she's one of those people.
She says, sister number one, Marie Gluesenkamp Perez says, oh, that's great. If you want to live in a city, you should. I think it's also true that you could put an apartment building in a rural town, and a lot of people would get a lot of utility out of that. But I think one of the things that is missed frequently in this discussion is that the shift to a service economy or a knowledge economy means that now your barber has to move to a city where they're not able to afford housing. And when you have domestic manufacturing, if you're a mill in a rural community, you're able to own land. You're able to spend time with your family. I'm not trying to slight the urban issue, but I think that divorce from the farms you rely on, from the water that you drink, from being able to ship your garbage somewhere else and not have to smell it yourself, it changes your relationship to the natural world around you. And if you're not clear about that and those relationships, you're losing something necessary. So yeah, she's on that Khmer Rouge, basically.
Yeah, oh my God. Yeah.
It's like she represents a city. She represents a small city in Washington. Like what is she talking about?
Can you imagine if like the reign of her and Jake Auchincloss?
No,
like
she is. Yeah, her and Auchincloss are like these are the two star abundance politicians, and they sound deranged.
They're going to like Marie Gluesenkamp Perez. She loves living in a rural area because no one knows that her husband he is now distributed to 7 different rivers, systems, and tributaries. That's the reason she loves body part gummies. She's going to get together with Jake Auchincloss and birth a shadow baby. And they're going to have the abundance Khmer Rouge where the cities are emptied and everyone has to live in rural apartment buildings that have sky gardens.
Rural apartment buildings.
And like there will be forced breeding until someone finally creates the family from Foxtrot reborn in Jake Auchincloss's vision.
The iguana comes separately.
Yeah.
But I like, once again, she's like, oh, like your barber can't live in the city where they cut hair because housing's too expensive. But like the solution to that is never to like, I don't know, build social housing or like put a cap on the rent. It's just like, it's like her washing machine problem. It's like, we could just demand that appliance manufacturers build better products. But like, no, it's just, we have to label it. And then with this, it's just like, it's all these bizarre little tweaks around the edges because like Marie, the Gluesenkamp, what she actually believes in is just very strange. And like, she's part of a Democratic coalition that expects her to do things about this. But like, all her answers are like, you know, these are both political, but moral and spiritual problems about being disconnected from the land you live in. So like the solution is what? Make everyone farmers again? Who the fuck are you? Thomas Jefferson? Like, yeah. Like aren't farmers like also dependent on the cities where their goods are sold? Like it's this weird, very, very strange, like glorification of rural areas. Again, it's like, it's just Republican shit. Like smaller rural communities are better and more soulful than big cities.
This reminds me of like, this was more of like a 2000s thing because there really aren't that many libertarians anymore. They've all become like MAGA guys or gone on to other things. But like during the Bush administration, there was this phenomenon where like if you were like a left liberal and you were really upset about things like warrantless wiretaps and Gitmo and all these things, the people that you could talk to actually about these things and would be where you were at were libertarians. And so often you would have this thing happen where you would hear a libertarian start talking, and they, for the first like minute, you're like, oh my, yeah, this all makes sense. Like they're saying we should end the war on drugs, like that, this war is unjustified. We should persecute these people for war crimes and torture. And then enough time passes, and they finally say it. You should be able to buy a baby or harvest one to buy its organs in the future. And you go, oh, I see why you have such a small constituency. This is the same type of thing where it's like, oh yeah, it sucks that like, we have the locus of all economic activity in America is in urban centers where most of the service workers that keep it going and are the backbone of the modern American finance and service economy cannot afford to live there. The solution to that, instead of like government housing or price controls on rent or regulation of landlords and large real estate trusts, is to march them at gunpoint to the farms. And they can live on a hair cutter farm.
Well, actually, the solution is maybe people in the city should drive 3 hours to get their haircut.
That's a great idea, because then they'll have more of a relationship with the land in between them and their barber.
Yeah. Or maybe actually, I think a real abundant solution. Do barbers need clothes? Shouldn't all barbers be nude?
I'm so glad you brought this up.
Think about how in touch you'll feel with your barber when he's naked cutting your hair.
Yeah. The world's first nude barber, he's a Yimby.
Why?
That's what he was doing.
Here's a question that the populist left needs to answer. Why is it easier to build a nude barbershop in Texas than it is in New York and California? I ask you that. Aída, I want to read real quickly from Ezra Klein's view of populism and democracy. But before I do, I want to ask, like, who are your favorite like guys at the WelcomeFest? Like, were there any anecdotes that didn't make the cut for your article? But like, who is your favorite person to see and or talk to at the Abundance Fest?
Okay, so a lot of them weren't very like passionate or enthusiastic, but one guy who was pretty passionate. He was telling me that his political hero is Dean Phillips. And he just found it like so inspiring how he went against the party when it came to Joe Biden. And then he immediately starts talking about how New York and California are overrun with crime. But he was like really animated.
Yeah, like people wearing glasses.
Well, I mean, you talk about the strange lack of enthusiasm, or like the fact that people say their political hero is Richie Torres, someone that we all learned about a year ago. It just seems to me like there's no real enthusiasm, or they don't seem sure of themselves, because like there's nothing here to believe in other than like what already exists. It's just the Democratic Party. Take it or leave it. Keep voting for us. You have to. Like, there's nothing to like. Nobody really is passionate about zoning laws or fucking or deregulating small business or whatever the fuck these people want to do. Like these are not issues. These are not moral, political, or spiritual issues that matter, or like that anyone is excited about. But they have to pretend like they are, because they realize if they don't, then maybe they won't have a job, or maybe politics will turn in a direction away from them. And to that point, I just want to read Ezra Klein. This is from over the weekend in the New York Times. He's sort of, you can tell they've been kind of stung by the reviews that came in for their abundance book. And they're like, oh, everyone's saying we don't have a theory of political power. Well, allow Ezra to lay it out here. And I think it's very telling what he says at the end of this piece here. He writes, many of my more leftist friends and antagonists have asked me if abundance has a theory of power. I often say it does, but they're not going to like it. And that's in part because its theory of power is liberal rather than populist. Cass Mudd, I love that name, Cass Mudd, a Dutch
she's
political
a lowborn.
a Dutch political scientist, defines populism as an ideology that considers society to be ultimately separated into two homogeneous and antagonistic groups, the pure people and the corrupt elite. Different forms of populism populate these groups differently. Right-wing populism defines the people in geographic, nationalistic, and racialist terms. The corrupt elite tend to be educated, foreign, and cosmopolitan. Left-wing populism tends to sever society economically, the 99% against the 1%, or corporations against everyone else. Once again, like, I don't know who Cass Mudd is, but I think his definition of populism is that, like, it's a belief that there are pure people and a corrupt elite, to be wholly spurious. Like, once again, populism means democracy. It means popular support. It means the people, the masses have a say in the government that rules them. It would seem to be like, to me, it's the greatest good for the greatest number of people. But then, like, this hand waving away that, like, oh, it's all just this Manichaean view that divides people into, like, good and bad. Well, I think a lot of the criticism that Ezra got for his stupid book is that, like, yeah, like sometimes, yeah, there are antagonizing and competing interests in our society, and there are competing points of view. Some of them are good, and some of them are bad. Some of them are held by genuinely evil people seeking to it, most of whom just funded the WelcomeFest. But
yeah, how is this a sophisticated view of the world, though? How is this any more sophisticated? I mean, with Mary Gluesenkamp Perez, it's dividing the world into city and not city. But with the less Mercury-afflicted members of the coalition, it's the same thing. Everything that polls at above 55% is good, except for anything having to do with healthcare, housing costs, or Palestine. Yeah. Anything that we associate with, like, staffers that tricked us into posting a black square in 2020 is bad. This is, I mean, someone today said that Ezra Klein he's Thomas Friedman for the millennial set. And I think that's very true. And he's, as is always the case with the successor to the original, he's learned from Friedman's mistakes by presenting himself as more reactive and more open to the views of others. But if you actually look at all of this, if you try to address it, what are they actually saying? What are they proposing should be done, and who are they naming as their enemies? There is no complexity. We've seen this before. This is the early 90s DLC platform adjusted for tech donors, and all authored by people who have gone insane from taking about 800 milligrams of fucking Wellbutrin every day for 10 years.
And in the abundance Ezra worldview, like, I mean, there are groups that he's antagonistic to that he thinks, need to be confronted. They're just like homeowners associations and like labor unions. It's just it's a matter of just picking who your targets are. And he disagrees with the targets of left and right wing populism. Coincidentally, the targets of right wing populism are just non-white people. And the targets of left-wing populism are, the dramatically wealthy corporations and elites who, like, if billionaires can't be called an elite or a corrupt and parasitic elite, I don't know who can. And he writes, what both forms of populism share is a tendency to treat virtue as a fixed property of groups and policy as a way of redistributing power from the disfavored to the favored. Yeah, I mean, actually, like that, I think that is a pretty good definition of politics, in my opinion. But he goes on to say, under the populist theory of power, bad policy can be and often is justified as good politics. Every policy in this telling has two goals. One is the goal of policy or the project. Perhaps you're trying to decarbonize the economy or build affordable housing or increase competition in the market for hearing aids. But the other is the redistribution of power among groups. Does this policy leave unions stronger or weaker? Environmental justice groups, corporations. And then he goes on to say, my view of power is more classically liberal. In his book, Liberalism, The Life of an Idea, Edmund Fawcett describes it neatly. Edmund Fawcett. Human power was implacable. It could never be relied on to behave well. Whether political, economic, or social, superior power of some people over others tended inevitably to arbitrariness and domination unless resisted and checked. To take this view means power will be ill-used by your friends as well as your enemies, by your political opponents as well as your neighbors. From this perspective, there are no safe reservoirs of power. Corporations sometimes serve the national interest and sometimes betray it. The same is true for governments, for unions, for churches, for nonprofits. A lot is lost when you collapse the complex interests of politics into a simple morality play. There are often different corporations on different sides of the same issue. There are often different unions on different sides of the same issue. To know where you stand and who stands with you, you need to know what you are trying to achieve. This is not, I should say, some untested approach to politics. It's how Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, the two most successful national Democrats of the past 50 years, approached both their campaigns and their presidencies.
Obama was perceived as like more radical than Harris or Biden. Like, regardless of what his policies and rhetoric were, he was perceived that way. And he is the most electorally successful Democrat that we will probably see for about 50 fucking years.
Look, I mean, for Ezra, like the presidencies of Bill Clinton and Barack Obama were very successful. And like, I don't think he means electorally. I think he means in terms of policy. I happen to disagree. Yeah. Like, I mean, I think there were disasters for this country in a lot of ways. But like, it's this idea about like power can never be wielded for good. You know, power always corrupts. It's this like half smart college kid view of the world where you're like, oh, like when I was younger and more immature, I simply thought that, you know, there are bad people in power and that like power should be gained to like take that you need to wield power to take it away from the people who are evil. But like now that I've went to college and have a job now, I just know that everyone is sort of good and evil and that like all power needs to be checked. And like the important part about power is not having it and using it. It's just making it as diffuse as possible. Because like, so that like no bad actor can do bad things trying to do good or something like that. And I just think that like, that sums up like the worldview here is that like power is not to be wielded except by the people who fund the Abundance Festival. Because like, look at what Donald Trump is doing right now. I would say that that's an example of power being used for evil. I mean, like deploying the Marines in an American city to quell, you know, protests against his ethnic cleansing policies. But like, that's why like the idea that this is some way back for the Democratic Party is farcical to me because like power is to be used. The most important thing about power is keeping it and using it on behalf of the people who gave it to you. And like, yes, and using it against the people who are bad, who are evil, who are villains. Like, it seems like they're using power against everyone else every fucking day. And we're just supposed to, I don't know, tweak regulations and zoning permits to deal with that.
It's especially farcical now because it's like, okay, do you believe that if you do the Obama thing, what Obama did in office and just, you know, the point of your presidency is to show how responsible you are with power. So people like you enough for you to create like shitty Netflix documentaries till the end of time. Like that is a successful presidency. If you just do that with the next Democratic presidency, well, the Republican Party is just bound to go back to normal. There's no seal has been broken here. You know, this is not a new era of American politics. This is just, you know, this is just at this point like a 10-year-long fever. And if we behave responsibly enough, then our opponents will stop calling us pedophiles who deserve to be executed next time they hold the White House. You know, that's over. That is over with. And I don't know if these people know that and don't give a shit, or if they are so delusional that they think like it can become the 90s again. But it is so ignorant of the time that we live in. I mean, it's so funny that they mention Obama too, because the only reason that Obama won re-election by a pretty big fucking margin was that he named enemies after 4 years of like a healthcare bill that the insurance industry practically wrote and like a shitty stimulus that it was the exact policy prescription of these people's predecessors. He named Mitt Romney as a class enemy and won.
Aída, to your point about how when you brought up, for instance, Gaza to any of these people at the WelcomeFest, like they sort of stuttered, whispered, didn't really know what to say. And I think this speaks directly to the heart of this idea about power, because like these are the same people who have been telling you over the last 2 years, you can't expect the president to just do something. Like, look, Joe Biden doesn't have the power to stop Israel from killing all these people. I suppose you think he can simply just stop selling them weapons. It's just like they turn the power button like up on and off at will. in terms of like what you're allowed to do with power and what's realistic to expect of the US government being able to accomplish. Like whenever you talk to like YIMBY people about like, well, why don't we just do rent control and just have the state build housing rather than private developers? They're like, there's no money for that. Like who's going to pay for it? And it's like the US government has a budget in like the trillions of dollars. Like it's not like they could pay for it if they wanted to, but it's just this like, it's this mystification around the idea that like the people you elect to office should be expected to do something. And like they turn that dial on and off whenever it suits them.
Donald Trump is spending trillions of dollars to give a massive tax cut to everyone who's earning more than $300,000 a year. With the highest earners, people making millions of dollars a year, receiving the biggest benefit. Surely in this era of politics, where this was supposedly the austerity party, surely you could see that doesn't matter. But no, nothing can be done except for the crushing of the left.
And like, I guess I'll just bring it back to the protests and like police violence going on in Los Angeles and elsewhere in this country right now, because like, obviously like this is not an original thought. And like, this is sort of lib-brained, but like, I had to think about January 6th and sort of like taking in all of this stuff. And like, what I thought about it was that it was one of the greatest political successes in American history. Like, they did not manage to overturn the 2020 election, but they managed to get the 2024 election. And what Donald Trump did, one of the first things he did was pardon all of the people involved in it. So like, they exercised power illegally to threaten the government of this country and its politicians. And like, yeah, they got sent to jail for it, but then they were pardoned because the political party they were doing it on behalf of supported them. So yeah. How about the optics of that? How about the strategy, the electoral strategy involved in looting the Capitol and threatening to kill the vice president? And then 4 years later, the person you're doing it on behalf of is president again. How's that for power?
For like a year. I mean, talk about like bad optics. Donald Trump as a political entity was over, except for like, certain Republican primaries. Even then, like the conventional knowledge among conservatives was that it was going to be between like DeSantis and Doug Burgum for the leader of the future party. Donald Trump was like, it was the lowest he's ever been with his supporters, both after the vaccine and him like in the wake of January 6th being like, I disavow everyone who's there. Just let me have Twitter. And then, what is their solution to this optics problem? Well, they say that like, everyone there who did anything insane, anyone who got shot by a cop, anyone who did anything, they were actually like, it was a false flag or a federal agent, and the people in prison are victims of entrapment, and also that none of it happened. Just total denial. And in the sense that it stopped being an albatross around the neck of Trump's movement, it fucking worked.
Well, because he stopped apologizing for it and started celebrating all the people who did it.
Yeah.
So it sort of seems like it changed public opinion, at least as far as the election goes.
It's almost like the attitudes of powerful people can affect polls, and that public opinion isn't just this force of nature that exists alone, that operates independently.
Aída, just before we go here, just any final thoughts about WelcomeFest? Is there any moment that stands out in your head? Any sort of sensory memory? What were the food and drinks there any good? What was you said you attended there was sort of a happy hour. What was the socializing at this scene like?
Yeah, there was no music, just everyone speaking. Everyone's speaking really loudly about centrism and Richie Torres and open borders. There were 2 open bars, but no themed drinks or anything. Just a big, like plastic storage bin of gummy bears in honor of the Congresswoman's birthday. In full transparency, I did eat some of the gummy bears. I know you're not supposed to like just eat random gummies at festivals without testing them first, but but I did try them.
How were they?
They weren't bad.
She's been compromised, folks. She's taking gummy bears from the people she's covering.
No. Aída took Richie Torres' MDMA gummies.
I think this is the one place in the world where I would feel safe eating anything that was given to me, knowing that it wasn't adulterated in any way.
Yeah, my final takeaway, in a way, the sadness of the whole event was kind of comforting to me. I know for a lot of people, like including me, it can feel like things are totally out of our control, but I found it pretty comforting that like these are the people we're up against, and these are the people at the top of the Democratic Party. That just made me feel better.
Yeah, I think that that's a very good point, especially in light of like, in an organic protest movement that happened concurrently with this, an organic protest movement of people who, it wasn't affiliated with any party or any organization necessarily, but it was just people protecting themselves, protecting their family, and protecting their friends. For all that is said and, all the game planning about public opinion that is done about it, it showed that there is actually organic resistance to all of this, and that people will go out and risk life and limb for each other. And as grim as everything is, it's a very stark contrast to this political festival for the idea of nothingness.
And then like the very real like self-defense of people, standing up for themselves against, like I said, like paramilitary federal law enforcement targeting, elementary schools. Like that's not an exaggeration.
Yeah, it reminds you that like there are a lot of different types of people out there. Some of them are Pennsylvania voters. They're dumber and more incoherent than you could ever imagine anyone being. But a lot of people are very courageous, and maybe they don't know it until they're tested. I don't think a lot of these people knew exactly how this would play out. I don't imagine that in November of last year, they knew they would be in the streets, like fighting federal agents and now Marines. But it does show that, like, it's similar to what we said right after the election, that there will be times when people are tested. And sometimes it will turn out that maybe their beliefs weren't that tightly held. But other times, and this seems to be more common now, people turn out that they're made of much stronger material. They have a much tougher moral fiber than even they themselves ever assumed.
Okay, that does it for today's episode. But before we go today, I got one quick thing, and then a little treat for you. Per our sort of in memoriam for Jordan Breen that Felix spoke to about at the end of our last episode, some of Jordan's friends have reached out to us to share the news that his alma mater is starting a scholarship fund for sports journalism. And we're going to have a link to that in the show description. So just if you're thinking about Jordan, it seems like a very nice effort to remember him and to continue his work in the future in the field of sports journalism and MMA.
Yeah, I posted this. I've already donated. Anyone who, don't break the bank if you are in a precarious situation, but if you have money burning a hole in your pocket, and Jordan touched your life as a fan of the sport, a fan of his work, I will just say that, like, one of the things I found very harrowing about Jordan's tragic and untimely death was that this guy was a absolute titan in the sport, in the eyes of people who followed the sport intensely, in the eyes of people who read and listened to him. And his greatest curse was that he was just too ahead of his time. And it was harrowing to see this guy who was, I thought, such a titan, the unambiguously the greatest combat sports journalist in the entire world, that he unfortunately died in obscurity, even though in light of his passing, thousands and thousands of people have talked about the ways that he touched their lives. This is a way that we can make Jordan live on in more than just our memories as people that admired him and loved his work, that we can put some permanent marker that Jordan was here and that he touched the lives of thousands. So
in slightly later news, I mentioned that we'd be sharing some music with you at the end of today's episode. And now if you've listened to the show recently, first time or long time, if you listen to Chapo, you know two things about Felix and I: that we are fans of both John Fetterman and RXK Nephew.
The two men bringing back hip hop.
Yeah. And now we've referenced before the brilliant tweet that made John Fetterman into an RXK nephew lyric. Kill myself at my son's birthday party. I'm the worst guy in the Democrat Party. We've said Fetterman, Slitherman many times on this show. And listeners of the show reached out to RXK nephew. He's very gregarious on Instagram. He will respond to
very
a lot of
enterprising.
People. He's very enterprising musician. And they inquired to Mr. Nephew, how much would it cost to do a song about John Fetterman? RXK responded, $500. I have my engineer with me right now. Listeners, friends, I answered the call. I gave RXK Nephew $500. I feel like the modern day Medici family for my sponsorship of the arts. But without further ado, here is RXK Nephew's untitled John Fetterman track that was worth every penny and then some.
Steal it twice the price.
Yeah. The best line is when he says, John Fetterman can suck my dick. Actually, no, I don't want him to do that.
I get the sense he was learning more about Fetterman as he went.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't be more thrilled. RXK, he fucking crushed it with the John Fetterman song.
He really did.
Yeah, it's the RXK Nephew untitled John Fetterman song. Till next time, everybody. Bye-bye. And thanks.